Luke Fickell may be on the hot seat, but Greg Gard is the farthest thing from it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. Appreciate the heck out of you being here, for being an everydayer, for making this your first listen. I appreciate you so much. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Today's episode, we are talking biggest tight end storyline. Can Ashcraft step up? Tight end superlatives. But first, what would it take for me to move on to the fire Fickell or fire Gard stance? I got a great question. I'm going to throw it up there. That's what we're going to lead off, because the question came in right before the show, actually. John B says, you are a pretty optimistic guy. What would it take for you to ever get to the fire Fickell or fire Gard stance? What would it take for you to get there on either? First of all, thank you for the question. This was just a DM I got. And I am an optimistic guy. I am an optimistic dude. In fact, people that know me have sometimes called me toxic optimistic. Like optimistic in areas that I should not be optimistic in, and in ways that don't always bode well. So I am optimist. I am a guy that leans in that direction. What would it take for me to get to fire Gard or fire Fickell? What would need to happen this year for me to get to that point, or over the next couple of years? Let's start with Greg Gard. I don't think there's anything that could happen this year, barring some type of off-court scandal, like something that, if you go, what was that Pittsburgh coach who he got hired, and like a week later he drove through the fast food joint nude because he was drunk? Yeah, okay. You got to go. I'm sorry. You're representing a state university. You got to have clothes and not be drunk when you're going through a fast food chain. But barring some type of off-court thing, Gard is, and I said it in the opener, the furthest thing to me from the hot seat there is. And I get sometimes the criticism, and I talked about it. I get at times the frustration with his lack of deep March runs. The dude's won 65% of his games. He won the Big Ten, or a share of it, in 2022. He's found complete guys. You talk about a Nyzi Davis, that's an NBA lottery pick. Talking about a John Tonje who's going to get picked. John Blackwell's going to be an NBA fringe guy. I think Nolan Winter has a chance. He's been really solid. Last year's team, he's showed he can evolve. That's one of the things I've wondered. How can a guy like Greg Gard step out of a legend shadow, which was Bo Ryan? And that's a tough thing for anybody. How do you step out of the shadow of a legend? And I think for a couple of years, it felt like Greg Gard was a bit of a proxy for Bo Ryan. He was still Bo Ryan, but you can't be Bo Ryan. Nobody can be Bo Ryan. Bo Ryan's a 101. There's a reason he's a college basketball Hall of Famer, and the dude has won everywhere he's gone. He's a legend. He's a monster. You can't be him. How do you step out of the shadow? And I'm telling you, it feels like he literally stepped out of the shadow of Bo Ryan a little bit with, we're going to play different. We're going to play some zone. We're going to speed it up. We're going to spread the floor. We're not going to run the swing offense. We're going to hit the portal. NIL matters. Like his ability to pivot and evolve and change in those areas, I think bodes incredibly well for him and for the future of the Badgers basketball program. On top of it, he's adapted well to the portal. He's landed some real guys. He's shown a willingness to dive in there. I just don't think he's anywhere close. And again, the question was, what would it take for me to get onto the fire Greg Gard bandwagon? It would take multiple years of not making the tournament. I'm just being honest. I'm not telling you that's what you need to think. Again, we always talk about in this show. This show is the space for every opinion has equal weight. Mine does not have any more weight than anybody else's. That's the whole point of this. We're all in a bar having a beer together, talking hoops, talking football. Like that's the point of this show. So my opinion doesn't mean more than anyone else's, but I'm just telling you what would it take for me to get there? It would take 3 years of not making the tournament. It definitely wouldn't take 1. I don't think it would take 2. I think it would take 3 years of not making the tournament before I would say, okay, maybe we need to move into a different direction, because a lot of teams don't make the tournament every year. Making the tournament every year isn't something that is incredibly easy to do, especially for a program that doesn't have the biggest NIL funds, the biggest NIL coffers. So I think that's what it would take for me. Again, barring any type of off-court weirdness or scandals, I think it would take 3 years of literally not making the tournament, which makes you a mid Badgers, Wisconsin, or a mid Big Ten team for multiple years. I think that's what it would take. And even then, I would like to look at the context. Are you just missing it? Did you have injuries? Those things always factor in. Nothing in life is black and white except for like the best Pop Tarts, which are the cinnamon, the brown sugar cinnamon. That's the only thing in life that's black and white. Nothing else is black and white. So even then, I'd want to see context. Did he miss a tournament because his star guard got hurt? Did he miss a tournament, or did he miss a tournament because he just missed on recruiting and he flamed out in the portal, and then that's all on him? Context matters, but I think that's what it would take. I think 3 straight years not making the tournament, we start to talk about it. The football. So that I wanted to start with Gard, just because I just don't think he's anywhere close to the hot seat. I don't think he should be. I love him. I think he's easy to root for. On top of it, I don't think this program right now, where they've lost a bit of their identity on football, and maybe Luke Fickell hasn't hit the ceiling they wanted. I don't think they'd want to make a basketball decision anyway, unless they absolutely had to. So I think Greg Gard, you put him off onto the side on the hot seat chart. He's like a 1 out of 10. He's not a 0, but he's like a 1 out of 10. Luke Fickell, what would it take for me to move into that stance, into that lane? So I'm going to preface it with, and I've said this on the show, I think Luke Fickell has hamstrung himself a little bit with some of the hiring decisions he's made. Those seem to be rectified. I think he's proven in the past that he's a pedigree to win at a pretty high level, to build culture and to develop a team and to identify, people in certain roles that matter in the recruiting department, guys with Pat and like Max, who since left. I think he's made some really nice coaching hires, but it hasn't been great. 5-7 last year. I think if you were sharing a beer with Luke Fickell, he would tell you 42-10 against Iowa is unacceptable at Wisconsin. That's unacceptable at Northwestern. I mean, you get fired at Purdue if you go an entire year and lose like that. That's unacceptable. I think for me to move into the fire Fickell lane, and I don't want to do that, by the way, it would have to be a disastrous season this year. It would have to be a disastrous season because I don't want to get into a coaching carousel where you only give people 3 years. You have to give people 4-5 years to get their players to the upper levels so for sure. You have to know for sure. You have to know this guy is for sure not the answer, or for sure he is, because otherwise you are just going to cycle coaches. And every time you cycle coaches, you hit reset on the NES, right? You hit reset on everything. That's Nintendo Entertainment System for the people watching the show that may be under 25. When you reset everything, you lose players, you lose scheme, you lose coaches, you lose continuity, you lose development. You're going to lose guys to the portal. So when you hit that reset button, you're going into another 2-year at a minimum type of a rebuild probably. And people will point to Indiana and say, but Indiana did it. Yeah, I think they're kind of an outlier for several reasons. Most teams don't do it right away with a new coach. I mean, unless you're a Bama or a Texas, and even those teams struggle more with a new coach. A new coach, it's difficult to win right away, and you get really close if you pull the plug on Luke Fickell and potentially pull it too early. You get really close to entering that Nebraska death cycle where every 3 years you just bring a new coach in and you can never figure it out. Indiana basketball is a great example of this. You get into that death spiral where it's like getting stuck under Niagara Falls in that whirlpool that you can never swim out of. And you're just stuck there for purgatory, for eternity. And it really takes a Herculean effort to lift out of that. So it would have to be a disastrous season this year for me to move into that fire Fickell lane. It would have to be like 2-10, maybe 3-9. You have to look really bad in spots. I think almost no matter what, again, barring the same caveat I gave Gard, barring some type of off-court nonsense, off-field nonsense, which I don't think is going to happen with either of these guys. I think they're pretty solid, upstanding dudes. To me, you got to get it to the 4th year no matter what, and then we'll see. So that's where I'm at. All right, coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Biggest storyline, we're going back to our positional breakdowns, going to tight ends. Is this room good enough without Tanner Koziel, or is the pub about Tucker Ashcraft just a bunch of, is it PR? Or is it actual legit hype? We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for incredible friends of the show over at Monarch Money. And listen, you have got to check out Monarch Money. Trust me, I use them. These are the sponsors that I use. I love Monarch Money. I log in. My wife and I logged in literally the other day because we can compare budget or look at our budget, look at our goals, look at our spending. We can do it together. It lines everything up on a dashboard, all your accounts in one place, and it has line graphs and really visual representations for people like me that look at numbers and fall asleep. I can look at visual things and understand it. Monarch Money is incredible. It's like a personal CFO, bringing all your accounts into one spot to help you manage your money, track your money, spend your money better, and let's reach some of our goals. Let's be a little better with our money so we can retire. We can retire successfully, pass our wealth on. Monarchmoney.com helps you get there. Right now, it is a great offer as well because they're going to save you even more money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. You are not going to regret this at all. Okay, let's talk tight ends. Again, continuing our positional previews post-spring, the biggest storyline for me is Tanner Koziel, and it's the fallout of it. There's a couple angles with the Tanner Koziel departure that I find interesting / worrying / worth thinking about. And the first one is it feels like we are getting at least a little bit. And I'm a Tucker Ashcraft guy. Okay. I want to start there. When he committed, obviously he was the Colorado commit. Dion kind of was a little flaky with him. He came to Wisconsin. I remember the show I did on Tucker Ashcraft. I was watching the film and I'm like, I like this guy. I called him he looks like a redwood tree. I like Tucker Ashcraft, but it feels like in this offseason, the staff made a concerted effort to tell you that they need to get better at this spot. We're going to bring in Tanner Koziel. It's going to be one of our biggest targets. We're going to spend a significant amount of time and energy and resources to upgrade this position. And then Koziel came in, he flamed out. I mean, he just took I'll just call it like it is. I think he took the easy way out. I think he said, this is too hard. I'm going to go somewhere else. Fine. Bye. You don't need guys like that on the roster. Let me start there. Because if he's having a hard time making it through spring practice, you don't want that dude lining up on the edge in Bryant-Denny or lining up against Iowa or lining up against any of the mauling teams we have this year because he's not all in. So he's gone. However, now it feels like there's a ton of, but Tucker Ashcraft actually looks great. Tucker is incredible. Like he's done so well, big step up. And I just feel like that might be a little bit of PR because it feels like they weren't so sold on it all the way up until right before spring. And I think you look good in spring too. I do. Again, I'm a Tucker Ashcraft guy. I feel like the loss of Tanner Koziel, at least the potential of what he was going to bring this offense, still hurts because that's a 6'7" guy that caught 90 balls last year. And Tucker's not going to replace that. I think Tucker is a solid kind of, 3-down tight end in the mold of a lot of really kind of the rugged Badger tight ends, like the Troy Fumagalli types. Maybe not that type of weapon receiving wise, but just kind of, he can put his hand in the dirt. He can catch the 10-yard out. He can go over the middle. He's going to be physical. He's going to be tough. It's a blow to lose a guy with the potential of Tanner Koziel. And I think there is a little bit of like almost overhyping what's left in that room to get people to look away from the Tanner Koziel loss. Like a little bit of the magician saying, but look over here at all these things, ignore the prize tight end you brought in the offseason. I think there's a little bit of that. I still think that doesn't mean I think tight ends are going to be bad. I just don't think they have the upside and potential that I thought they could have if Tanner Koziel worked out. Let's talk a little bit about what happened. What went wrong with that? Was that a recruiting miss or was that just the type of thing that happens? I think that's just the type of thing that happens. What people need to understand is you need to recalibrate a little bit from what you're used to in tracking recruits at the high school level to the transfer portal. The transfer portal is speed dating on speed dating. Like you do not have a lot of time to get to know the player, the character, the work ethic, how they're going to fit into the culture, the system. You know the talent to some degree. You can watch the film, but you don't have a lot of time to get to know the kid. So I think inherently there's going to be more misses in the portal. I think there's going to be more players that you just don't know how they are as a person, how they're going to react. And then you get here and they don't vibe, they don't fit in, they don't fit the culture. And okay, like a ship's crossing in the night. Okay, we'll see you later. And so I don't consider it necessarily, it's a miss in that you devoted resources to it. But I don't put it on anybody. I think this is going to happen in the portal. This happens to every school in the portal. They bring players in and they leave pretty quickly because they don't fit, because you don't really get a chance to develop the deep relationships that you do at the high school level. And even at the high school level, developing those relationships, you have misses. So I don't put it on anybody. I know some have said, what a recruiting miss by the staff. I don't think so. Listen, how many of us have gone on a date and you're really into him, and then a week later you're like, ah, man, this lady's nuts. Like she is crazy. I don't want this. I think that's kind of what this was. It was a short fling that seemed like it made sense, and then you bring them home and you realize they don't brush their teeth. I Not that that's happened to me with a date or anything. I'm just saying, like, you bring them home and you realize, oh, this doesn't work. And I think that's kind of Tanner Koziel to some degree. All right, let's talk depth chart here. What is this looking like? You have Tucker Ashcraft, who is kind of the prototypical guy. He's kind of the lunch pail guy. He's going to block. He is in the short to intermediate areas of the field. I think he has some weapons offensively. He can catch the ball, but he's not an elite athlete. He's not dynamic. Lance Mason came over, transfer portal guy, to kind of give them more depth after Tanner Koziel left. Lance Mason is kind of interesting to me because he has some of that vertical speed. He gives you a little bit of the pass catching ability that Koziel could have given you, but he doesn't quite have the size. He doesn't quite have the frame, and he hasn't proven it at the highest level. But he gives you a little bit of speed and athleticism at that spot and some veteran depth. So I like Lance Mason there. Grant Stec is very interesting to me. Big bodied guy. Again, a player, 4-star recruit when he came in out of Illinois. Really big, physical, looks the part, good hands, good athleticism for his size. Definitely the type of player that can move people from the point of attack as well. So Grant Stec is a guy I like a lot. And then you have just kind of a bunch of, where's Jackson McGowan going to play? You know, the highly athletic but kind of slim tight end that they picked up out of LSU in the portal last year. Does JT Seagreaves, who's been in the program for a couple years, does he have a role? Good hands, former basketball player as well. Where might he fit in? Emmett Bork, true freshman. By the way, that just sounds like a tight end or a fullback, right? Emmett Bork with a great block there. Where does he fit in? Yeah, I don't think it's going to be this year. I got to tell you, he was, I think, the lowest rated or one of the lowest rated composite recruits in last year's class. I think he's going to outplay that. Not necessarily this year. I think he's going to be a really solid, develop into a steady starter, French starter, or really good second tight end for this team. And that's a really valuable piece, especially in a Jeff Grimes offense that utilizes that tight end, is going to get a lot of hay out of that. And then you have Nyzi Davis. Where does he fit? So Nyzi Davis is the other tight end, true freshman coming in, really, really athletic, a little raw. I don't think he plays this year, but he could develop into a version of what you had in a Lance Kendricks or Travis Beckham. That's the upside with a guy like Nyzi Davis. Maybe he gets some special teams work this year because of his athleticism, but that's kind of the depth chart there. Let's get into superlatives next and a few over-unders. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers, including which player am I most excited about seeing from the tight end room this season. But first, a quick second for our incredible friends of the show over. All right, let's grade the position. Let's start there. Great. One thing I think I've changed. I used to do these positional recaps, reviews, outlooks, and I would grade the position currently and in the future. I just don't know if it makes sense to grade positions in the future anymore because there's so much player turnover in the portal era, NIL era. I don't know. Like, I was going to grade receivers in the future, and it's like, I don't know who's going to be here, man. So I'm not going to grade tight ends in the future either. I think if I'm grading this position right now, it's like a C+, C+, which is average. It's fine. I think if Koziel was in here, it's like a B+. I do think he brings you down a letter grade. I really do. And for all the people that are just like, who cares? Doesn't matter. Well, they went on and got him for a reason because they didn't think they had that guy in the room. So I think it's fine. There's a potential. Maybe it's a B- if a guy like Lance Mason plays above his skis. If a guy like, Grant Stec takes a step. I do think in a couple years, this, again, I'm not going to grade it in the future anymore just because there's so much player attrition everywhere. But I do think there's a chance in a few years with Grant Stec as he develops, Nyzi Davis as he develops. I like Emmett Bork. I like some of the younger pieces here, but there's not a lot proven right here. There's not a lot of proven depth. I don't think at the upper levels there's a ton of elite athleticism. I think it's solid. I think it's a C+. Let's get to the scale of Badger greatness. How good can Tucker Ashcraft be this year on my scale of Badger greatness, going from Sherrard Cadogan, if you remember him, to Jake Byrne as my middle mark, and ending up at Jake Ferguson? Where could Tucker Ashcraft be on that scale of Cadogan, Byrne, Ferguson? I think he can be right in the Byrne category, right in kind of in the middle tier. Maybe he's a 6 out of 10 type guy this year, which is a solid above average starting tight end. I think Tucker Ashcraft can be that. think there's enough people that talked about him this spring that saw him in practice that said, yeah, I think he really has taken a step, that when so many people are saying that, you got to start to stand up and say, okay, there's probably something here. There's enough opinions that I value, from Kokorowski to Bartholomew to Osen, who all said, yeah, I really like how he looked this spring. And those guys aren't just paying lip service because Koziel isn't here. They really do think he took a step. I believe them. I think he's like a 6 out of 10 this year. Which player am I most excited to see this year? I think it's Grant Stec for me. I remain very, very high on the upside of Grant Stec. He is a jumbo-sized tight end that can also, create some mismatches on linebackers. He's finally kind of had that full year in the system. He looks bigger. I'm excited to see what flashes might be there for Grant Stec. Again, a former 4-star tight end with a ton of physical tools. Great size, the ability to block, soft hands. Not a burner, but not a slow guy either. I think there's potential all Big Ten type upside with Grant Stec. I'm really excited to see how maybe he can move into that number 2 role this year and kind of build on, not just this year, but build into next year as the guy going forward. The next great Badgers tight end is on this roster. Who is it? Or do you think he's not on this roster? I think the next potential great Badger tight end could be Nyzi Davis. If I'm looking at one guy that I look on in this positional room and say, I think he could be a star. I think he has star upside. I think it might be Nyzi Davis. Now it's always easier to dream on the guys that are coming into the program because you haven't seen anything to dissuade you from the optimism, but he is a really athletic, talented, positional weapon, create some mismatches. He can, outrun linebackers and some of the slower DBs, but he's too big for some of the safeties that they might put on him. I think he could be a mismatch issue. Again, I mentioned his upside. It could be a bit of a Lance Kendricks type of an upside as a guy physical enough to still block, but athletic enough to get up the seam and cause some issues. So I think if there's a next great Badgers tight end on this roster, I think it's going to be Nyzi Davis. Player most likely to be boom bust in this tight end room. The most likely boom or bust guy, I have Jackson McGowan. Came in, originally committed to LSU, came in as a portal addition last year, never really was able to work himself into the rotation. But if you go back and watch the film, there is highlight level catches here. One-handed catches, really good hand-eye coordination, great speed, athleticism for the spot. He's not the biggest guy. Maybe use him is kind of a jumbo slot position. Maybe you slot fade in the red zone. He's got a lot of athletic tools, but through 3 years of college, coming up on 3 years of college, it hasn't translated yet. So I think he's the ultimate boom bust guy because he could go and end up being over the next 2 years, a dynamic weapon at the tight end spot that is a mismatch guy that catches 30, 40 balls, 4, 5, 6 touchdowns, or he might not ever crack the rotation. And it's kind of getting to that. This is not a deep tight end room. If you're going to be a guy at this level, it's time to make your move. So I have him as my boom bust. Tight end most likely to outplay expectations. I think it's Tucker Ashcraft. I already talked about it. I think people are still slow on him and still a little low on him, still a little like, I don't know. Some of that's based on what they've seen, but he's had to play earlier than he should. He's had to play and get into his rotation quicker than he should have. I think he's going to outplay those expectations. I think he's going to be a really solid, above average starting Big Ten tight end. And I don't think anybody expected that originally. And I think a lot of people have already written him off because they've seen a couple penalties, a couple issues in his first couple years, but he's still young and he's still developing. And I do think he's taken that step. I think he's going to surprise people this year. He is my most likely to outplay expectations. My biggest concern is what? I think it's just the overall upside of this room. I don't know, especially this year, I don't know if there's a ceiling raiser. And that's okay. You're not going to have stars at every single spot, but Koziel, I think, could have been some of that. And now with him leaving, I don't know if there is a ceiling raiser in this room. I think you have that at receiver. I think you have that at running back. I don't think you have it at tight end. So if I'm wondering what's my biggest concern, I think depth maybe, but you went out and got a Lance Mason. So maybe depth's okay. You have 2 tight ends in this 2026 class or 2025 class. Sorry. I just think it's the overall talent level. I don't know if there's a star in this group or a person in this group that really forces defensive coordinators and defenses to become a little uneasy. Player most likely to make the crowd say, holy bleep, did you see that? I think I'm going to go back to McGowan. I think it's Jackson. I think he's the guy that is the most likely to make some type of highlight play where everybody's in Camp Randall. They put their heads up and they're just like, Jackson did what? Holy crap. Because I've seen that on his film. I've seen that on his highlights. He's got playmaking ability. He's just got to make it happen. And final thought here. Final thought here. Oh, yeah. I got over under 15.5 receptions, Tucker Ashcraft. I'm going to go under. He had 12 last year. I just don't know if I see a huge role for the tight ends this year. And I think Akers going to get some of those. I think Jackson Akers he is going to play some tight end. He's going to get some of those. I think they're going to want to throw to the running backs. They have several receivers I think they want to throw to. I just don't know if there's enough to go around. So I'm going to go under 15.5. I think he maybe ends like 12, 13, 14 receptions with maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns. And that's fine. That if you're going to get what I think you could get out of Vinny, out of Ballard, out of Tretch, out of Dillon, out of Dupree, you don't need a lot from the tight end specifically. And I think if you had Koziel here, I think it'd be different, but he's not. So I'm going to go under that. Definitely curious what y'all think on that one, though. Anyway, we're going to wrap it there. And I definitely want to say this. Happy Memorial Day weekend for everybody out there. And always keep in mind, everybody who paid just the ultimate price to defend our freedom and defend this country. Have an incredible Memorial Day weekend on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.